we have acquired ourselves a Compaq portable 386. It's got a few issues. That's a bit tatty, and obviously the BIOS battery has failed on it. We've got the user diagnostic floppies with it, which is kind of cool, apart from the fact that we've got a 3¼ inch drive. Now I've tried booting it off the 3¼ inch drive, and I'll show you what happens. What I've done is I have took a disk, I have sysed the disk using a DOS computer, and then copied the diagnostic on. We put that in, press F1 to resume. It does a read of the disk, it flashes red and green, so I suspect, press any disk to continue, tries to read. I suspect the disk drive's not working. The back on this appears to be held on by 6 screws, so we're going to start by be careful with this one, there's a bit of damage in the past. Okay, so I'm going to remove my 6 screws. I've got a little pot here that I'm putting the screws in to keep hold of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it appears to have long screws on the sides, and the middle 2 screws, top and bottom, are shorter screws. The back comes off. We have a nice shiny cover. In the back there's quite a bit of information. I will put some screenshots in about that in a second. And then we are presented with a Dallas real-time chip here, which we know is faulty, and a large piece of metal. So I'm going to whip the screws out of this. Turns out they're a slightly smaller size. So the first lot of screws were Torx 15s. These are Torx 10. So when we look at the back of the machine, what we know about this is we've got a power supply connector, floppy drive connector, hard drive. This is power to the floppy drive and hard drive. This connector's for the keyboard. This connector goes to another little board underneath which runs the display. We've got 2 strips of memory. I believe this has got 1 megabyte of memory as standard. And we have a Dallas real-time chip, which I hope is socketed. By the looks of it, it is socketed. So what we're going to do is, before we go any further, we're going to change that. I'm going to cut the cable tie off this and remove it. It's about as fragile as everything else on this computer. We're going to take note of the dots down the left, and hopefully, oh yes, 1 Dallas real-time chip. This one that's come out is a 1287. And the one we're putting in is a slightly different model number, but I am assured that it is a direct drop-in replacement. Now unfortunately, I've just took it out of the packaging and it's got a load of bent pins, so I'm going to pause the video. Well, okay, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to unbend the pins. You don't need to pause it. I'll cut the video in a minute, Lily, when I edit it.
Don't ever know.
Okay, so there's the original one. And there's the replacement. I'm just checking it's got the same number of pins it has. So that's going to go back in. So we're going to put the Dallas chip back in. Just sort of lining the pins up as we go. Because I say they were slightly bent. Give it a little bit of a jiggle and a little bit of a wiggle. We'll put a cable tie back around that again in a bit. So we've got a new Dallas real-time clock. So I'm going to turn it on and see what it does. We've got diagnostic not set, run utilities set, and press the F1 key. What we're going to do is we are going to remove the motherboard, and we're going to get into the drives on this thing. So you need a little bit of firmness with them. I'm just going to use a pair of cutters to gently grip the connectors. There's the one. There's number 2. The power connectors. Oh, they're tight then. 1, 2. Okay, so we've disconnected them, and then we've got this big one down here. And we'll just give that the same sort of gentle persuasion. Finish it off properly. Yeah, right, okay. So now we should be able to unplug the power cable at the top, and the motherboard should hopefully... Oh, we've got a screw in here, look. There's a couple of screws here that have to come out. And now we can lift the motherboard away. Okay, another screw underneath here. Then we can lift the motherboard away. Oh yeah, the serial port looks like, actually it's not, it's a video port, isn't it? Which is for the external monitor. It's plugged into what I think is the video card. So what we've got here is a little board that slides out. And it appears that that is our video adapter. Oh yes, look, it says on there, display control. So I'm going to put it back in because it's working, but it is kind of interesting. What we've got here is the cage that holds the floppy drive in. Now, from what I can see, looking on the internet, this needs to come off, but it doesn't really want to come out. So there's a screw in the top here. Right, when I'm pointing at things, move the camera to look at what I'm pointing at, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we know there's a screw in the top here. So I'm going to remove this screw. And apparently the whole cage should slide, he says. So I do think this is going to have to come off. I hate those cracking noise. I always think I'm going to break something. So it does come off like that. It just does need a little bit of persuasion. Okay, so there we have the caddy. Right, okay, so what we've done, we've got the drive adapter and we've connected the GoTech up, and we're going to give this a try. So we've got in here DOS boot disk 1. Let's see what it does. Let's see if we get any joy out of her. Aha! We've got starting MS-DOS. This is far further than anything else we've done with this computer so far. So it looks like the floppy drive that was fitted in it is faulty. So what I've done is we've got the diagnostic image in here, which is the Compaq. So we go back to the screen. We do a directory. Let's see what it lets us do. Now setup. After a lot of messing about, I've got the drive working. And what we're going to do is we're going to put DOS 5 on it. Which I'm just selecting using the GoTech drive. So So she's still coming up with the system diagnostic error. When you turn off these lights here, let's try turning some lights off. No, wrong set. Okay, both sets. Okay, leave it like that. Right. We're still looking at this. We're getting this system error message come up. So what we've done, we've got the diagnostic disc in the drive, and we're going to load up the Compaq diagnostic. Okay, so we press any key to continue. Have we seen this in connecting the battery? I'm going to say no, so we're going to put the date. Let's see if it will actually take the date. You know what, it doesn't matter. We're going to go 1st of the 1st, 1998. We'll put it in 1998. Okay, so time, we'll leave the time as 0017. Floppy drive is a 1 1/4. Okay, so we've saved that in. We'll press F3, save the changes and continue. I'm going to remove my floppy disk effectively, and hopefully we'll get a DOS load now. Don't know why it's doing that. Other than that, there we go, we're in DOS. What we're going to do is we're going to exit out of that. No, file, exit. Then we're going to make a directory called diag. Go to A drive, back to A. Copy star to C colon, but not backslash, because I want it to go into the directory file, not into the boot directory. So hopefully now when we go back into C diag, we should see what we put in there. So there we go. So now what we've done is we've got the diagnostic files on the C drive. What we've got here is the hard drive caddy. We know that that's working. We have the floppy drive caddy. So what we're going to look to do now is reassemble this. We've got the cable that we used here with the GoTech, and what we're going to do is put it back together. So this sat in here like this. What I do find quite interesting is this board here, which is the converter board between the floppy drive and the 5 1/4 inch floppy drive, has actually got some electronics on it. It's not just an adapter, unlike a lot of the cables that are floating about. So I'm not entirely sure what they're there for. You know, this is old. This is the beginning of a lot of the technology, isn't it? It's being put in early 386. So what I want to do is just pop this back together We'll pop it back in its cage, put the cage back in, and then we'll be looking at fully reassembling the machine. I'm just going to give these a little nip up. No, there we go. And I'm just going to get another phone and take a quick photo of this, because I do not know whether this is a 720 or what. So here we have the hard drive. Here we have the hard drive cage, and the floppy drive went into the hard drive cage underneath, and the cables came over the top. So I think this goes in going that way around. So this goes back in here and has one single screw at the top to hold it in place. That essentially puts our drives back into place. We're going to go to reassembly. A couple of little screws here and here. One goes just here. Not going to tighten them up properly yet. One went just here. And that one doesn't want to grip. I did have a bit of problems with that, and underneath here there's a screw that goes into the power supply area. Yep. So, keyboard connector. We have a power lead here that provides power to the hard drive. Floppy drive cable. Okay, looks like I've done something wrong because the floppy drive cable won't plug in. So I'm just going to have to look into that now. So we'll take the floppy drive back out and see what I've done. Always the fun of working on old computers that don't have any instructions, or little to no instructions. So, you know, that's tight. There's no more I've run it down here. It wants to run under here. That's going to give me the slack I need to be able to connect up. Very well constructed computer. So I think possibly at some point in time it's had the keyboard change, maybe, who knows. So I'll put this back in here. Went in much easier. Screw back in. Then we can plug in the floppy drive cable, power for the hard drive, power for the floppy drive, and finally the actual IDE cable for the hard drive. Having corrected my stupidity, We're now going to plug in this cable here. This runs the display adapter. I suspect it's just ISA. Then the next thing that's going to happen is the metal back's going to go on here. Okay, so we've got the little metal cover here. This goes on like this. There's some of these that the cover doesn't cover the whole machine. This one does. I don't know whether it's a difference in different countries and different areas and different territories. You know, whether they have different rules in the United States, Britain, Europe. I have absolutely no idea. So I'm going to start by putting the top two corners in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put 4 screws into this, and then I'm going to make sure that it still powers up. You know what, I'm not, because I'm confident it'll power up. Now what I'm doing, I'm not tightening the screws up, I'm just nipping them up. This allows everything to move around. Again, I'm not wanging anything up particularly tight. 2 larger screws, one in here, one in here, and that's the back of the unit back together. So we've got a cover here to go on. So it turns out this computer was built in 1989. So you know what, she's going back together quite nicely. Screw the four corners in first. Now, the bottom left hand corner is a bit difficult, which is why I'm going to do that last. I had a bit of a game with it. Just got to sort of find the screw. There we go. Put that in. One last screw. Wonderful. There we go. Don't know why it's doing that. Ever 162, I will look into it. Let's exit the DOS shell. I've just done that wrong. the config is AUTOOEXEC.bat. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to remove this line here for the DOS shell. It's remotely annoying. File, save, file, exit. There we go. She's working. CD. Amazingly, all of the games work. There we go. Player 1. I think I've probably got some setting up to do on the mouse. Oh. For some reason it's not picked the mouse up. What's that? F4. Let's try Microsoft Mouse. I have a feeling that we may not work, or this mouse is faulty, one or the other, because I've not tested it in anything. So I think what I'm going to do is come out of this, I'm going to change the mouse and we'll try a different mouse. I've just changed for a Logitech mouse. CGA, low power computer. Looks like the mouse is faulty. There we go, we can play Lemmings on it. So I'm quite impressed at that. Strange little amber glow. There we go, so she's working other than a bit of a minor setup issue. So I'm going to have a Google of that and see what the setup issue is, and we've got to change the cable on here. But other than that, that is a working computer. As an added bonus, I managed to get hold of a correct floppy drive for it. So now we have a 5 1/4 inch drive fitted in, which means that all of the utility programs will now work off their floppy disks as intended. It's holding the memory, but the clock's not running on it, so when you check the time after it's been off for a couple of days, the time is exactly the same as when you turn it off, and it's throwing up an error, so I suspect that's what the error's about. So I've had a little bit of a look on the old interweb, and it looks like there's a way of modifying this chip so that we can connect a battery to it. Now, when we look at this, in between this pin and this pin, there's some pins missing. So let's give it a go. I've got a knockoff Dremel. Okay, there's one of the terminals. That's phenomenal. According to the internet, this one here is your positive, this one here is a negative. So I'm just going to get a couple of bits of wire and come back. Got a couple of bits of wire here. I'm just going to start by tinning them. I'm going to try and get a bit of solder on these, see if how well it works. Where do I need to go? Yeah, okay, you know what? I've got a shiny bit there. Yep, I've got a solder joint there. I didn't want to do that. I've closed my connector in here, so there's something we need to be aware of. So there we go. There's a potential problem you need to be aware of when you're soldering onto these, that it is quite easy to make a mess. Now we're going to use Yellow for Live. A bit of solder on the iron. The cables. That's the negative. What I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap it round the battery holder a few times. And then just come in, feed a bit of solder into the ball, and let's grab that quite nicely. And on this end, I'm going to chop off one of the legs. Repeat. Make a nice ball round it. Fill the ball full of solder. You see I'm putting the solder in from the side the iron's not at. And that's it. Put a nice 2032 in there. And yeah, I think what we'll do, I'll reset the camera back onto the tripods and we'll fit that into the back of the computer and see how we get on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take this real-time clock out that I fitted that just hasn't worked, and refit the original one that we have just added. Our extra pins to. Let's see if this works. Obviously I'm going to expect an error because I've took the battery out, time and date not set, etc. So I'm going to have to put the GoTech back into this to get it to boot. Right, I'll plug my floppy drive emulator back into it and we'll boot off the floppy if I want to continue. Because of course it's forgot the BIOS settings, hasn't it? It's forgotten the hard drive settings, so as such then wouldn't load off the hard drive. Still waiting for a replacement cable for this to arrive that I bought off eBay, and yeah. Once that does arrive, this is going back on eBay, so the lucky buyer of this will be able to see a video, see what's been done to it. Here we go, we're in. Current date, it's the 6th, it's the 19th, because it's backwards, because we put the date first in the UK, and time is 14:13. Floppy drive that we've got is going to be a 1.44. There we go. Let's pick the hard drive up, so we're going to F3, save changes and exit. So we're going to see now whether it throws an error up again or whether it boots properly. It'll be interesting to see. Isn't that amazing? That the problem was down to the real-time clock that we bought off eBay not working, so I'm guessing maybe they were new old stock or they were faulty. I'm just going to do time on this. Yeah, time's moved on. There we go, look, the time is moving every time we type it. So by now it should be 2:14. There we go, yeah. So this time the clock is actually working, which previously it wasn't. So for extra, I'm going to turn it off. We'll turn it back on, see what she does. So I think the moral of the story, if this works, is that we shouldn't bother changing the real-time clocks. We should repair them. Wonderful. We've got a mouse driver. There's no mouse at the moment because the mouse isn't plugged in. Mouse driving dot, and then we can go into good old Windows. So there we go, all of the errors are gone. The thing's working beautifully. It's been an interesting experience to go through it, to set it up, to get it working. You know, it's been a long time since I've worked on Windows, on DOS based stuff, and it's kind of cool to get back into it. One of my favourite old games, but you know, she loads it, it's quite quick in all fairness.